Hello everyone. So how's the conversation interesting you up to this point? Yeah. Okay. Now there's one more thing that I'd like to present before I open up things to general questions and answers about the subject. And that is I want to contrast the state of enlightenment as was described by David Hawkins in the material I just read to you with actually the state of at-onement with God and how that looks, so that you can recognise the difference between those two states. And because many of the things that he describes are similar in nature to what at-onement with God eventually will look like. However, many of the things are very different in nature too to what he described when you're at one with God. So what I'd like to do is contrast a few of the things that he mentioned with what is really the truth of the at-onement with God state. And once we do that, then we can have a discussion on any of your questions about the subject. Now remember, he said, I'll just go through different parts. I haven't marked any of this book because it's actually someone else's book, so I can't do that. So remember he described at age 3 how he went through a sudden full consciousness of existence, a non-verbal but complete understanding of the meaning I am, followed immediately by a frightening realisation that I might not have come into existence at all. So remember how he described that particular thing when he was 3 years of age. Now, here's the soul. Let's say that's your soul. A soul not being influenced by another spirit, let's hope, at this point. Here's the soul of a person being influenced by a spirit. So here's the soul of the spirit that is influencing the person. The soul of the person being influenced by the spirit only needs to be open to the emotion that the spirit is expressing at that moment in order to feel the same emotion that the spirit is expressing. In other words, as long as this soul is open to this connection with the spirit because of some factor, any of these spirit's emotions are going to pass through the person as if they are their own emotions. Right? So if this soul of this spirit over-cloaking the person is quite evil and they have a feeling they want to kill somebody, right? Then that feeling, if this soul is open to that feeling, will pass through this person. Whether it's a child or an adult, doesn't matter. It'll just pass through as a feeling of rage towards somebody, of unreasoning rage towards somebody, most probably. Now conversely, if this soul is in quite a good state, what many people on earth classify as an enlightened state, this soul will be many times in a state of what is called bliss. Probably erroneously named, but let's, from our perspective here on earth, it's definitely bliss. All right? Because for most of us here on earth, we are in this first sphere condition. We're lucky to be in a second sphere condition generally on earth. And so what's happening is we're in a certain state. Now, anybody who's in a greater state of love than that state is going to feel like bliss to us. Does that make sense? And particularly if they're 6 spheres removed from this state that we generally have here on earth, it would be like walking along the road and the average person projects their normal emotions at you. Like this morning, I drove up our driveway and there was a girl sitting on the driveway watching the bikes go past, right? And the first thing she did was project anger at another girl for me driving up the driveway, right? I don't know why the other girl got it instead of me, but anyway, there it goes. And she projected this anger and what am I meant to do? Am I meant to get out of his way now? Sort of emotion coming. But not towards me, but towards this other lady. Now, let's face it, the majority of our life, we're getting these kind of projections from all sorts and sundry, aren't we? You walk into a supermarket and you've got a grumpy girl at the checkout. It's very, very rare to get a happy one there because often they're very shut down and they're not allowed to feel their emotion anyway while they're there. And so they express their emotion to you, or not express it, or are very quiet, or whatever. And these emotions are coming at you constantly, and we all accept them as completely normal. So when somebody comes and expresses some love for us, no, that's outstanding, isn't it? Like, that's totally different than normal. That's outstanding, and we're very, very drawn to that, of course, because love is such a beautiful quality to be drawn to. So when this soul, this sixth-sphere soul, let's say, which has this sixth-sphere soul has become perfected in their love for others, is now projecting love in a one-on-one connection to this person, of course this person is going to feel like they're in the place of bliss 24/7 that connection occurs. Now, as that feeling enters you and passes through you, you're going to become totally addicted to that feeling in that state. Like, who's going to want to give up that feeling? Like, after you've lived a different life and had different types of emotions through life, of course you're not going to want to give up this feeling of bliss and everything. And so that re-establishes and even connects you to the Spirit even further. And the trouble is, though, it taxes, as was illustrated by David Hawkins in his biography, it taxes the bodies. So you remember your spirit body and your material body, and it's taxing the bodies, this flow of energy. Because the reason why it's taxing the bodies is because the soul is in a completely different state to that soul. All it requires for me to feel the emotion is to be open to these emotions, which of course I'm going to be open to if they're loving emotions, right? But because the soul is in a completely different state to that soul, there's an energetic drain on the bodies, and the bodies can't cope with the connection. Because in reality, the soul can't cope with the full connection either in its current state. It needs to expand itself in love before it can cope better with the connection. But the irony is, if it expand its own condition, it would feel a love coming from within, and it wouldn't need a source of love coming from outside of itself, would it? And so therefore it would feel less the intensity of the other soul projecting at it. Now you notice also that this person, in this case David Hawkins, started taking on a lot of the belief systems and analysing a lot of the belief systems of the soul he was connected to. Remember, he stated that he had an automatic awareness of all of the oneness of people. He had an automatic awareness of all of these different things. In fact, his whole teachings of the scale of consciousness all came from the Spirit. Right? Had an automatic awareness from all of those things as well. And he had to still go through some emotional experiences of his own, and his own personal experiences with psychiatry and psychology and so forth, for him to allow some of these experiences to affect his own practice and his own life. But because there was this heavy projection of beautiful feelings and emotions coming from the Spirit, of course he's going to do that eventually, isn't he? As soon as he possibly can, because he's receiving all of those kind of feelings. But the key in it all is near the end, where he said, the most intense occur when a state fluctuates and suddenly ceases for no apparent reason. Now, a soul that's at one with God can never lose the state of at one with God. And particularly while that soul is in the spirit world or here on the earth in a consciousness of that state, it can't ever go through pain in that state unless it's gone through another reincarnation process and had to go through the entire process again in releasing different emotions. So that being the case, if this person here is in a state of bliss inside of themselves and they are truly in that state at a personal level, they can never experience a negative emotion after that point. Right? They will never experience the pain of the downers, as almost everybody who is in this state, being influenced by a spirit, does experience. And this person also, because of this state, does have a direct connection with God. Now, unfortunately, what happens in this state is a lot of times this person here believes themselves now to have a connection with God. what he called in his summary, the I am presence, and losing all sense of individualization. Remember I said that was one of the most inaccurate things he could have said? The truth is that what happens in this state is a lot of people get into this place where they lose their sense of self. But remember, I've said right from the beginning to you that the whole point of the process of incarnation is about gaining your sense of self. And there is this huge inaccurate error that's being portrayed on the planet, that if you have a sense of self, that you are now out of harmony with truth about oneness. And that is not true. The truth is, you can be at one with everything and everyone and still have individualization, a sense of self. Why create a process, if you think about it from God's perspective, why would God create a process that creates individualization only for you to have to lose individualization to get back to God in the end? Now, that doesn't make much sense, really, does it? Obviously, there is a way back to God that allows for you as an individual to develop your free will. And remember too that free will is paramount in all of God's designs. But remember what Hawkins said he was doing? That he was making his free will subject to the will of the presence. What is that actually doing? That is actually making his will subject to the will of the controlling presence. Now let's assume for a moment that, as he does assume by the way, that this controlling presence is God. Let's assume that for a moment, all right? If the controlling presence is God, then why would God have given him free will only to expect him to relinquish it in the process of his development? Now that doesn't make much sense either, does it? Why would you give something and then take it away? That makes no sense. It's not very economical either. So oftentimes these spirits will actually say, basically they feel they are God. Right? So many spirits who have reached the sixth sphere of their development believe they are God, and so therefore when they connect with you, they are in total agreement with your assumption that you're now connecting with God, because they believe they are God. But the truth is, they still have a spirit body. They still have a connection with that spirit body of their own, and they are not being honest in a pure sense with you in that state. They are being quite dishonest about their particular state. And by the way, this also applies to the spirit who channeled the Conversations of God material to Neil Donald Walsh. It applies to many of the other channeled materials, like the spirit who channeled the Course in Miracles material and so forth. Many of these either claim to be God or allow the person to build on the assumption they are God, when in reality they actually do have a spirit body, and anybody of development on the earth who can see them can see that body. So it's actually a very, very damaging belief system that gets created by these assumptions. And many of us, because we can't see the spirit body of the spirit influencing the person, we then assume that they must be connecting with God. And that is not a valid assumption. It is only something we hope to believe or wish to believe or hope to aspire to, but it may not be true, and we have to investigate it to be true. So unless we could get a whole room full of people like this who are all mediums who can see very clearly spirits, and then get one of these people who say they are enlightened here in front of you, and then ask what spirit is with them and motivating them, and talk to that spirit. If there's not a spirit, we won't find a spirit. Unless we do all of those experimentations, we're not going to be able to validate the truth of the information, are we? So why would we then go ahead and believe it if we can't validate it? We're better off being in a state where we can allow the validation of the material, then believe it. So what I'm suggesting to you, if you don't believe me now about what I've been presenting to you for the last 2 hours, is put it aside for a little, and then whenever, long for the opportunity to validate this truth or not, and sooner or later inside of your own system of attractions, what's going to come to you is an opportunity to actually see the spirits or know spirits with these people who you have actually looked up to as gurus in the past, right? And by the way, another thing is that these spirits do want these people to look up to them as a guru type person. In fact, many of these spirits call themselves, the people on earth therefore call themselves an avatar, and it's not the movie, it's they call themselves an enlightened being. Well, the truth is, if a person's on the divine love path, they're never fully enlightened, are they? Because if divine truth is infinite, are you ever going to know all the truth like God does? No. So therefore you are never going to be fully enlightened as God is. God is the owner of all truth, and we will only ever know a subset of that truth. So every time we claim that we are somebody like an avatar or a guru or whatever else, all we're doing is actually living in this place of arrogance. And that's one of the things we channeled about today too, how the spirits who had set up the oneness movement could see their, and after a while, Ramtha talked about the issue of arrogance and how arrogance is totally the opposite to humility and what's going on there. So the truth is that we're better off actually now looking at this situation and analysing it completely and saying, all right, we know this spirit is obviously claiming to be God. This person is having all of these experiences, but they are fluctuating from experiences of really strong negative emotions through to experiences of complete bliss, and then back to experiences of total abject terror, and then back to bliss. Now, if a person was actually God, would they be experiencing that? And as Peter pointed out before the session, also many of these people who are experiencing these emotions have quite a few physical sicknesses in their own body that they're having to cope with. Of course they have, because their own body is getting hammered by a heap of energy that its own soul can't control. Right? And so there's going to be all sorts of spirit and physical body things set up inside of themselves, disharmonies set up inside of themselves that create lots of problems. Now, we've got to face the truth of all of this. If a person is God and claiming to be such on the earth, then how can they have a physical sickness? How can they ever be old? How does that happen if they are actually God? Now, obviously, I'm saying to you that there's no one on earth that's actually God, and who's never been anybody on earth who's actually God. But if there's a person who's connecting with God and getting to a point of at-onement with God, why would they also have sicknesses? Can you see there must be some kind of disharmony? If I am connecting with God and I'm at one with God, then obviously God doesn't have any sickness or illness, so why would I? Does that make sense? So actually, there are many things that we can see in a statement of a person who's gone through these kind of experiences. There are many things that we can see actually can be challenged just through logic, let alone having a discussion with the person themselves. But in some cases, when you have a discussion with the person itself, it's very, very interesting, because the spirit does not want the person to know the truth that you are wanting to talk to them about or to the spirit about. So I've had many conversations with people where the spirit guiding them has been in total annoyance and anger towards myself for even raising the issue with the person involved. And you can understand why, because the spirit is actually getting something through the connection. So 2.5 years ago, when I began talking to the leaders or I wasn't allowed to talk to the leaders of the oneness movement 2.5 years ago in the spirit world. They sent some of their, what they called their underlings, if you like, at the time, to talk with me because I wasn't worth their attention at the time. Does that make sense? And when we had a chat and I started talking about some experiments that they could try, I also talked about with them this issue of over-cloaking people on earth and how damaging that was. Now, there were huge amounts of resistance to that discussion, and that resistance remained for nearly a period of 2 years until the spirits themselves started to see the truth of what was going on. Now that they can see the truth of what's going on, now they can see the damaging effects of what happens in an over-cloaking situation. And they also commented about what they can see in terms of what's happening on earth with regard to the situation. They can see these people walking around as oneness beings in an enlightened state, but in reality the emotional condition of the person is very much in disharmony with the state that they're walking around in because of the influence. Now, when you're at one with God, you do not need to be over-cloaked to be in that state. You will be in that state yourself. You won't have to have any spiritual influence or any extra spiritual experiences to be in that state, because you yourself will be having God's love 24/7. Now you remember he described this tingling sensation that went from the base of his spine to his crown. And he remained in this tingling place all the time. And he said it was very, very hard for him to operate in the real world, right? And he was always trying to get out of the real world and be alone and be by himself, because to be in the real world was just such a contrast. Well, when you're in a oneness state, while you will have those feelings, but they won't be coming from your base of your spine to your crown, they'll be coming from your crown to the base of your spine in the other direction. And also, what will be happening in that state is you will still be able to function in the real world constantly. In other words, you will be able to interact with every single person at the soul level that you meet or have ever met constantly. You will still be able to write a book. You will still be able to play a musical instrument. In fact, you will be able to do it in that state in the best possible way you could ever imagine in that state. So rather than there being a disconnection from what we call the real world, you will actually have the opposite thing occurring, where you begin connecting to the real world in a real level to everyone. So you've noticed the more and more we've got to know each other, and the more and more we've progressed together, like on the divine love path, there's more and more of a feeling of joining with each other. Isn't you ever noticed that? You know, you can feel it now in the room here, can't you, generally? Like, remember at the start, there were all these different people, some young, some old, some all from different backgrounds, hardly anybody talked to each other. Everyone would go their separate ways straight away. You remember all of that? How that was all occurring? And you notice as you're growing in love, all of a sudden things are changing there, and you're starting to have more real interactions with people. There's far more acceptance, far less judgment of everyone. Well, that will grow to a point where you will mirror God's acceptance and God's judgment, which obviously there is none coming from God, of everyone. And you will be in that state, and you'll never be able to get out of that state no matter what happens. Aside from if you reincarnated, of course, right? If you chose to do that, that depends on all of the emotional injuries of what world you're reincarnating into. But aside from that, you are going to be in this state of bliss constantly. But it won't be given to you. It will be because of the shifts and changes you have actually made inside of your soul. So that state is this state here is a real state. The state here is a facade. No matter how good it feels, it's still a facade. Now, if we understand that this kind of emotions that he does describe and more is available to you in the at-onement state, that obviously can provide a lot of motivation to dealing with these painful emotions, can't it? And remember yesterday I talked to you about having faith and how faith protects you? And one of the things we need to have on the divine love path is faith that we can actually here on earth reach the same state that and actually be in a much more blissful state than many of these sixth sphere spirits who are over-cloaking people on earth are actually in. And we can do this while we're here, but all we need to do is be brave, and that sounds like might be hard sometimes, and courageous, right? And also be willing to feel every emotion and to be honest and truthful with ourselves about all of those emotions. Now, when I say all, obviously, you know, if we're coming from a first sphere state when we started, that's going to require quite a lot of dedication, doesn't it, to do that. But wouldn't it be better having a real state that means when you pass, and by the way, in that state your passing will probably be at either the hands of someone else or a choice, right? Rather than actually an old age dying process. When you pass, you will actually stay in that state. And you won't experience the terrible grief that the majority of people experience who are over-cloaked when they realise the disparity between their own condition and the condition of that was generated on earth through a spirit. Right? So can you see there are quite a lot of different contrasts between the real state and this facade type state. The facade type state often is instant in its manner of appearing. The real state takes time to develop. You can't instantly release all of your emotions and come to a point of at-onement probably without dying in the process, right? So, and even then you still have the prospect of having to release your emotions to do it. So the truth is that if anything happens in an instant manner, then it is a very high probability, and I'm saying to you all the time, it's the cause of some kind of spirit influence when it's like that. So also you notice from Hawkins' description, he said he automatically felt this love for everyone, right? Now, you will not automatically feel a love for anyone when you're in the real state. What will happen is you will have to release all of the emotions that cause you not to have a love for everyone in the real state before you get to a particular place. Does that make sense? He also said that he has these swings between terrible emotions and blissful emotions. When you're in this at-onement condition, you will never have a swing back to the old emotions. Right? You'll never be bipolar again. So you will actually stay in this state of bliss with God, and you'll be able to reflect that state constantly with everyone around you. In this state, he said, he abdicated his own will to the will of the presence. In this state, God wants you to actually feel your own will that's harmonious with love and do it. That's a very different state. In this state, when you're at one with God, you will actually be in a state of bliss, at one with God, but doing your own thing at every single moment, because your own thing is going to be completely harmonious with God's laws and completely harmonious with truth, and more importantly, completely harmonious with God's love. Right? Now here, that's not the case. What he's doing is abdicating his will to this presence, and that is giving away your entire life, basically. That's why there's so much pain associated with the passing. Because when you pass, you recognise that your whole life was lived for somebody else. And that's painful to become aware of that. So can you see the contrasts between what is the real state and what is this facade state that everybody is telling you is real but is not really real? They are created in totally different ways, and they are also experienced totally differently. And it's very important to see this contrast, so that when people tell you the story of what happened to them, when you're assisting them to work through different things, you understand what story is being told. Because when you hear the story, you go, wow, yeah, there goes the spirit again. Yep, I can see that spirit. And then you can connect with that spirit and say, why did you do that? You know, what's going on there for you? Why did you over-cloak this person? And you can help more than one person in that interaction. But if you believe the person who's coming up to you saying, oh, I had this amazing experience, it's this and that, and now I'm enlightened and it's so amazing, and what you're feeling from them, in fact, is still all their rage and their anger and all of their other emotions, plus a connection with a spirit who also has a lot of emotions towards you as well, then state the truth of that to the person. It's better they learn the truth of that now than it is when they pass. Because if they learn it when they pass, they're just going to go through lots more pain. So my suggestion is to look at the contrasts between what real at-onement with God means and what you can call it Christed or whatever else you want to call it. I call it being at one with God. That occurs in the 8th sphere transition, so the 7th to the 8th sphere. That's when that point is reached. That is a very different place, emotionally, very different place than this place here, where your emotions are being constantly influenced by an external entity. And it's not what at-onement means. So if we can now have some questions about all of that, I'm happy to answer them. Okay. There was somebody before the break. Can I start with you, Matt?
I'm actually found the last 2 days extremely difficult and painful.
Yep.
Right now, just I'm really struggling. It feels like there's a real battle going on inside of me because there's lots of stuff that's coming up, like when you're saying real, and it feels like my soul is kind of coming out a little bit, and then it just feels like there's this massive oppression, and
and now they're just influencing you so you can get out of this place. Like, they're just stopping you now from asking the questions. So just allow yourself to breathe and pray to God and just allow yourself to breathe and get back into the state where you can ask the question. Can I ask you a question, just to help you come back here with me? You feel quite afraid.
Yeah. I've got a lot of physical pain that it's coming at me at the moment, but my head just feels like it's going to explode. Mm-hmm. And my back is just completely constricted.
Yep. Okay. What happens is, by the way, it's very important to understand that your fear is one of the hooks that they can then manipulate in order to make you feel this way. The fact that you're afraid of feeling this way actually allows them to make you feel this way. Does that make sense? Like, it's the fear. Now, in your case, you have some quite controlling spirits with you, rather than a benevolent spirit with you who's giving you emotion. If you had a benevolent spirit with you, you'd probably want to keep him, whereas you've got some spirits with you that you'd rather not be with at the moment, right? And what's actually happening for yourself is that your fear, so let's change this person's soul to being quite dark, right? We'll just call it dark at this point. Here's your soul, it's you, spirit body, and what's happening for yourself is that your fear in your soul, your terror and fear about being influenced by spirits is actually allowing them to influence your body through that terror. Do you follow me?
Yeah, with everything that you've said, I've been able to join a lot of dots within things within my life, but what I've been struggling with is to find when it happened, because...
when it began, or?
When it began, because like with the story you're talking about today, he had that realisation of bliss, so it's kind of easy to kind of reconcile with that.
Yeah.
But
whereas when you have dark things happen to you, it's a bit harder to tell the difference, because some of your own experiences are dark too, aren't they? So
well, like all the ones that I remember are dark.
Yeah. And my feeling is that it doesn't matter when they connected to you. Most of the time we can assume that they connected to you at a pretty young age, because we have a lot of young people in the audience at the moment, as you can realise, that are quite mediumistic, right? And you can see that many of them have very, very strong connections to spirits. And for many of you who are young, who are mediumistic, you just need to probably assume that it began probably in the womb or shortly after you arrived, after you were born. And it doesn't really matter when it happened. What matters is what is your hook to these spirits. Does that make sense? From yesterday, you can see that. And the hook to the spirit, once it's detached, prevents them from influencing you anymore. Now, for many of us, the hook that we have to spirit is fear. Now, it might be something like fear of their anger. So, and we can relate a lot of these hooks that we have to spirits to actually hooks that we have to people on earth. So what happens when an angry man comes up to you? How do you react?
Nah.
How do you react?
Not very good. Like, just, I leave.
You leave, or you please him as much as you possibly can?
Yeah, I tend to find out, I feel the situation, and if it's going to be direct anger, then I'll please, but if I feel like it's going to creep in, I'll slowly slip away.
Right,
Yeah.
so if it's direct, you'll please him. If it's indirect, you'll try and get away out of his company.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'll just leave my body in a way.
Oh, you leave your body, yep, okay. This is one of the things that allows them to influence your body. Does that make sense? So your fear of angry men, all we need now is to have an angry man in the spirit world projecting at you, and your fear of angry men is going to cause you to detach from your body, which allows them to do what? Just step into your body and start using it how they wish, causing all of these body things to occur. So can you see, dealing with the fear is one of the necessary steps. That is the hook into them, if you like, the way that they can get to you through this fear. Now, fear is overcome by what?
Feeling it?
Well, yes, we have to feel it, but fear is a feeling, and what antithesis, if you like? What's the opposite?
Joy.
The truth has to, at some point, enter us emotionally. Does that make sense? Fear and truth are basically the opposites. Fear is false, appearing true, and truth is the real truth. Does that make sense?
So if I'm choosing fear as opposed to being truthful, then that's when all these...
Yeah, you're choosing to keep the false real to you, or appearing real to you. So what's the false appearing real? Let's have a look at it from an emotional perspective. Do you believe the spirits can harm you?
Yep.
And I don't. So what's the truth? Can they harm you?
My truth or God's
Well,
truth?
you know they have harmed you, right?
Yeah.
So what's the truth?
Yeah, that they can.
They can harm you. How? Because they don't harm me. So how did they harm you?
Through my physical pain of the aches of
They're
my
giving you
body.
physical pains, but how is that happening? You've got control of your body.
Yeah.
So what's the truth?
Through my allowance of it.
Something going on. Can you see? There must be something going on. And so what I'm saying is, all right, let's recognise the truth. I am allowing an angry spirit to affect my body because I'm giving him what he wants, because I'm worried about what he's going to take from me if I don't. The truth is he has no power over you, but you don't believe it yet.
I actually have some pretty fierce dreams.
Yeah. Many of us, by the way, who are mediumistic, go through some pretty intense experiences. So you'll notice that, like young Simon and Alex, who are both very mediumistic, and then Josh, who's up the back there, you've all had very intense mediumistic experiences. A lot of the younger ones have even more than the older ones, because as we get older, we have a tendency to be able to know how to deal with it and know how to control it under the circumstances in which it arises. But the younger we are, we often haven't got that as a background, so it's very difficult. Yeah.
I've got a deep terror towards going to sleep, and even when I wake up in dread, but I get raped a lot. It must...
Yeah. 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 And did you hear my comments to the lady yesterday about that? Did you hear my comments to the lady yesterday about that? Yeah. Yeah. You see, a lot of your fear is actually the fear associated with these childhood events with spirits. Does that make sense? So if you can allow yourself to deal with the terror, and what I had to do with all of my terror, and I had quite a lot of it, was I had to pray constantly to God about just keeping me safe while I'm dealing with this emotion. Now remember yesterday I said one of the ways that you kept safe is by being willing to deal with the emotion. So one of the things that you're going to need is some courage to deal with the terror that's within you. Do you follow me with that? So if you have the courage to deal with the terror that's within you, now you have this emotionally open, willing spirit. What's going to happen is God and our celestial friends can protect you through the process of dealing with the terror. But part of this terror now has infiltrated you as a belief. It's a false belief that spirits can harm you. The truth is, they can only harm you through your terror. So while I have terror about them, they can certainly harm me. As soon as I actually face the terror that's right in front of me, they can no longer harm me. This morning we did a channeling session with a group of Israelites that I said earlier who had been tortured and abused and killed by slave owners. And those same slave owners in the spirit world were still torturing and abusing them, right? And the way they were doing it was through the terror of the people who had been abused. Now, what I said to the person who's been abused was, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to ask 2 celestial spirits to come to you. And what I want you to do now is go up to the person who has been abusing of you and say to them that you're never going to abuse me again because you're totally incapable of doing it now. Right? Just say that to them. And I am never going to do what you want anymore, even if it means I'm going to die or get tortured to death or anything. I'm not going to do what you want. Now, the spirit who I was talking to went into this really deep grief and fear about doing that. But after about 10 or 15 minutes, the spirit eventually decided he was going to do that. And he confronted the other spirits who were in this angry, abusive place. And the instant he confronted them, they didn't know what to do. Because now all of their power had just disappeared. Once you as a person are willing to face death rather than do what another person says, from that moment on, you are now in a place where you cannot be influenced through fear. You can still have fear inside of you, but you can't be influenced by that fear because you're prepared to die rather than be influenced. Does that make sense? So all of us on the planet need to, I'm spitting occasionally, I noticed. All of us on the planet need to realise that we need to allow ourselves to experience our fears and get to the point where we will no longer compromise our soul in any way through this fear. So at the moment, they know that you will compromise your soul through the fear. Does that make sense? And when you're in a state where you no longer will compromise your soul through the fear, you're prepared to die and still stick to your guns, if you like, they will no longer be able to ever influence you to do what they want.
I've had recently as well lots of dreams, I suppose, to re-invoke fear, where I've had people chasing me with guns,
Yep.
or people walk up with knives and just keep stabbing at me, and
Yep.
you're always trying to avoid.
Yep. So allow yourself to wake up from those experiences and then feel the terror and the fear, like just feel it bodily. Remember that was happening down the front here, wasn't it, just earlier? Just let yourself feel the shaking and just let yourself breathe, but pray while you're doing this. Because many of you still don't understand the power of prayer. Because when you pray, what actually happens is no spirit who's around you, who's in a terrible place, can actually survive being around you. Right? So what they do is they go away in that time that you're praying. And as soon as you stop praying, they come back if you've not dealt with the emotion. And then if you pray again, they'll go away because they can't stand what's entering you while you're praying. Do you follow me? So there is a lot of ways that we can deal with this fear by firstly just praying, but then asking for our spirit friends to help us keep the spirits away while I'm feeling it. Now go into it. Choose to go into it. Now, if you don't choose to go into it, you now have an unwillingness to deal with the terror, and now your spirit friends have to step back from you and allow your law of attraction to trigger your terror. Do you see the dynamic? So while I'm unwilling, I am going to be pummeled by my law of attraction. Does that make sense? To get me into a state where I'm willing. Once I'm willing, now there's all sorts of assistance that can be given to me. So, when events like this are happening, terrifying events are happening in my sleep state or my awake state, if terrifying events are happening, remember, all right, the issue I've got to deal with is becoming willing to deal with this emotion of terror. And you can do it. You can get through the emotions of terror. Right? You're going to need to experience it bodily and emotionally and grieve as you're experiencing it generally, but you can get through it. Right? And God has designed your body and your soul to be able to get through it, to be able to actually get through any emotion, including terror. So can you see what needs to be done there?
Yeah, I'm clicking onto quite a few things that you're saying, because I have processed on certain issues.
Yep.
And now I just feel like this one's kind of like a big one, so it's taking me almost...
This one is probably your biggest emotion.
Yeah.
And once you get through this, a lot of the other things that you are faced with will seem like chicken feed to you. Do you understand? Like once you get through terror, every other emotion is much easier, trust me, like every other emotion. And so the terror often dominates us until we release it. If you can actually release the terror, it can be one of the most powerfully enlightening and lightening experiences in your entire life. Your whole life changes once you release the terror that's inside of you. So if you can understand that you can do this, but it's going to mean getting into the emotion, and prayer is going to be a very, very important part of the process. Longing to God for her love to enter you while you're dealing with these emotions, and asking for your spirit friends to protect you. Remember, they are under the control of your will. Our celestial spirit friends are totally able to assist you as long as you will it here. But at the moment, you are more afraid of some fellas in the first sphere than you are of actually, and afraid of dealing with the fear, than you are of actually asking the help from these spirits. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. And while we maintain that fear, we're maintaining this hook that we have into them. And while we're maintaining the hook into them, they are going to continue to be able to influence us. So when they give you these big headaches, which has lessened off a bit now for you, hasn't it? When they give you these big headaches, all you're doing there is allowing them to influence what's going on in your head through the hook you have with them. So the hook you have with them is you're terrified of their anger, and that terror of their anger allows them to influence the headache going on in your head. Right? If you can actually allow yourself to experience the hook into their anger and the fear that you feel about their anger and the fear about men's anger, you'll actually find that the hook in that allows them to hurt your brain and your head will instantly be relieved. Does that make sense? And you'll be able to start noticing the relationships between what's happening in your body and the emotion that you're connecting to these spirits and how they're able to influence you because of it. Now remember, once you get out of the fear that you have with them, your hook into them now has almost been totally cut off. You'll have a few other hooks to deal with down the track, with women or with men, but the fear, the terror, is the biggest one. That's the one they can influence the most. And the next one down from that is anger. So these are the two that are the biggest possible influences they can have on you. Once you release the causal emotions of those two things, what can they do to you? And if you're prepared to die rather than do what they want, how can they ever influence you? Nobody can then. Yeah. And I know that for many of you might have sounded dramatic, like if you're prepared to die rather than do what somebody wants. But to be frank with you, you will get to the place when you're at one with God that you'd be prepared to die rather than go down the street when you don't want to. Can you believe that? Well, that's what you'll be like. So mummy rings up and says, "Oh, can you go down the street?" "No, I don't want to, Mum." And you can shoot me and I'm still not going. But that's what you'll feel inside of you, that feeling, like that firmness of loving your own soul will be there constantly, right? Now, it's not going to be an unloving place. It's not going to be done in anger or resentment or any of those things. It's going to be a loving space. So if you felt from your mum a projection that she's just trying to control you, You would not do what she wants, even if somebody threatened you with death to not do it. Does that make sense? So when we get to that state, not a single spirit, no matter what our condition, our condition can be still in the first sphere in every other place, in every other thing, with our sexual problems and our relationships with women, our relationships with men. We can have all these other issues in the first sphere still, right? We might be still in the first sphere with all those issues, but once we deal with this emotion of fear inside of us, no spirit will be able to influence any of those other issues. And that's a very, very freeing place to be. So in my personal progression, the fear was the very first thing that I finished up addressing in my life. It took quite a few months of doing it, about 3 months in the whole, and I had these terrifying, what were in the beginning, terrifying fear fits where my entire body just locked up and contorted, and I stayed in that state often. It felt like cramp in every muscle of my body, and I stayed in that state often for anywhere up to 3 hours. A couple of the times I passed out completely because I couldn't breathe, and I still survived the whole thing, right? And your body is made like this, and your soul is made like this, where you're able to survive a lot of these experiences, right? And once we get through the fear barriers, every other emotion's like just a breeze, really, in comparison. It's the fear barriers that are the worst possible emotions to deal with, and ironically, many of the dark spirits, it's the fear stuff that they're influencing us.
Thank you.
Does that help, mate? If we go, let's see if there's anyone who hasn't had down here. If we come down here.
Hey, Jane.
How you doing?
I'm wanting to know if you look at.
Is that on? I don't think it is. If you give it to me, I'll turn it on for you. It's definitely off. Takes it.
I was wanting to know, if you look at someone, can you tell them if they're over-cloaked? Like if you look at me, can you go, yep, you are, or you aren't, or?
Well, that process is almost a pointless process, because at any one moment, all of us at some point, depending on the emotions we're denying, are influenced by a spirit. When you talk about over-cloaked, we have to look at the degree of how much a person is influenced by the spirit. Now, you've seen, I think, young Simon was once, I think, here in an auditorium, over-cloaked by a spirit. I think Liz, where's Liz? You here? You were once over-cloaked by a spirit here in the audience. Josh, you've felt that at times, haven't you? Being over-cloaked by a spirit. When a person's completely over-cloaked, it actually feels, when you can feel an emotion. So even if you can't see the spirit, what you will feel from the person is it's almost like the whole thing now is just a facade. What's going on now is just like totally not real. It's something that's being manufactured. That's what it feels like.
To the observer?
To the observer. Does that make sense? So it feels like the person who is observing is now feeling this feeling. This is an entirely manufactured thing that's now happening in front of me. And the truth is that it is a manufactured thing by a spirit who's connected to the person, right, acting out their stuff. So you can actually feel that and sense that for yourself. Now that's a far different degree of influence than a person who's going about their daily business getting influenced by having little thoughts dropped in here and there and here and there all the time and being influenced in that manner. One of the ways you can recognise within yourself that you're being over-cloaked at any moment in time is whether you go into places of emotions that seem totally uncontrollable but not yours. Do you understand that? Some of you have experienced this, yes? Where you've had an experience of emotional experience that seems totally uncontrollable to you at the moment, but it actually also at the same time feels like it's not even yours. Now in that moment you are being definitely over-cloaked by a spirit, and the spirit is now working through you. How many of you have been to Pentecostal church? How many of you have been to a place where they have the gifts of the Spirit, and they flop around on the floor and... Yep, how many of you? Yep, okay. So you can see in that place they're moving around on the floor, having all these different experiences. What's really going on? You can feel it, can't you, in that moment? wow, this is some kind of spirit thing going on now. The spirit is now influencing this entire experience, right? And the truth is, in that place, the person involved is not also in a real state. There's some hook the person has to that spirit doing this thing. Now, in a Pentecostal church, the hook is, if I'm flopping around on the floor, I'm affected by the spirit. And everyone in the audience admires me because I get affected by the spirit every week. Does that make sense? So that's one of the emotional hooks. My emotional hook is having this feeling that everyone admires me doing this, right? And there are a lot of other emotional reasons why we might hook in at any one point in time to a spirit and allow the spirit to act through us. In our day-to-day life, though, I feel the more insidious type of spirit influence is the type of spirit influence where you're merrily walking, going along, and you have these thoughts just dropping in. Half the time you think you're talking to yourself, and in reality you've got different spirits influencing you through the process. So whenever you notice a thought drop into you that's out of harmony with what you've learnt to be love, take note of it. So my suggestion is, like, carry a notebook around even with you and write it down. I have to address that. It come from somewhere. It either come from me or it come from someone outside of me that I've allowed to connect to me. One of the two. So let's address it. Write that one down. So let's say the thought is, now I've had quite a number of you come up to me and say, I've had thoughts of wanting to kill you. Like where people have had thoughts of wanting to kill me. And I've said to them, well, do you think that's your fault? Why would you then hook into that thought? Do you know, what about me annoys you so much that you have a thought drop into your mind that you'd like to kill me? Now, for some it's, he's talking about emotions all the time, I'm sick of it. And that's enough. And that's enough to cause the thought, right? For others, it's a feeling that the spirit connection is going to break their power, right? And they are very confronted by that, and so they then have that thought, kill AJ, and that gets repeated to them. How many of you, do you mind admitting those people who've had those thoughts? How many of you? Yeah, to kill me. There's more actually. There's a few more. There's a few more people. There's a few more. There's actually quite a few. You'd be surprised. Now all that is just spirits dropping thoughts in. Does that make sense? The spirit is trying to influence you in some way. Why? We've got to look at why. And secondly, we've got to look at how did this thought even enter me? There's got to be a hook that I have into the spirit. And you know, the hook is often a lot more innocent than what you believe. See, a lot of times what we do is we judge the thought. So we go, I want to kill AJ. Well, where did that come from? That's a terrible thing. I'll never say that to anybody. You know what I mean? We don't say it to anyone, and we don't express it to anyone. We hold it to ourselves. We're thoroughly confused, and we go around for weeks worried about why I want to kill somebody. Do you know what I mean? And instead what we need to do is say to ourselves, all right, I was connecting to a spirit there who wants to kill AJ. What was my connection to the spirit that allowed the spirit to drop that thought into me? And you know, it might be something innocent like this, I need approval from a man. You know, a lot of deaths in history, a lot of murders in history have actually occurred because somebody wanted somebody else's approval. You see this every day in the news, don't you, when you hear of murders? A lot of them are, one person wants this person to murder that person, they go ahead and do it. Why? Because they wanted the approval of the person who wanted them to do the murder. You see? And this happens all the time with our own connections with spirits. All of these things. Why did I go and sleep with that girl? I didn't even love her. Because you've got a hook into a spirit who wanted to sleep with that girl. Does that make sense? What's your hook into them? What do you feel? I might feel powerful when I've got lots of women interested in me, or whatever it is. And whatever that hook is causing the thoughts to be dropped into my mind, and then I allow those thoughts to generate into desires in a way. And because it's merging with my own unhealed emotional state, of course that's quite easy to achieve, and then off I go and do it. And if we allow ourselves to look at the emotions that are involved in each interaction, we'll quickly find and quickly disconnect from the spirit in each interaction. So while it's easy to tell when a person is over-cloaked completely, it's not so easy to tell when a person is just being influenced with their words. And to be frank, we can actually assume until we're at one with God that we're actually going to be influenced by spirits all of that time until we are at one with God, quite easily. And then after we're at one with God, we're going to be influenced by spirits who are in a state of love all the time rather than spirits who are negative and causing us to think, things that are not harmonious with love. The question was born out of a fear.
Yeah, I have a lot of uncontrollable rages at home.
Yep. And what do you feel about them?
Well, it's a little bit embarrassing to be... well, everyone in the neighbourhood hears my voice and I like to swear. Yeah. Because good girls don't swear, and I've been enjoying that for a brief amount of time, but now I can't stop. Yeah, yeah. It's embarrassing. Yeah. But on the other hand, I really like it.
Yes, and that's the hook. You see, there's something in there for you. So my suggestion is let's have a look at what's going on. And I'm glad you brought this up, actually, because there are a lot of people who want to be in an uncontrollable rage.
Yeah,
and because it feels powerful, like it feels really powerful. So let's look at what's really going on. I'm in a rage, and I know when I'm in this state, I'm really being heavily influenced by this spirit, whatever the spirits are. Now, in your case, often it's, what do you feel, woman spirits or men spirits, rather than me tell you?
I don't know. If everyone tells me it's just me, there's something... Well, not everyone. My husband.
He's everyone.
Thinks it's me, but I know that I'm out of control. I mean, I'd have to say male, not because I feel it, but because it's very forceful.
What kind of things do you say? without the expletives.
Well, then that would be silence.
Oh, okay. Who do you want to say them to?
I say them to my husband, but now what's actually happening is I say it to my husband when my children are around because I can't even stop it. Okay.
So here's your hubby. Right. He's a bit crotchety because he's like not sure
Scared.
about you anymore.
Paralysed with fear.
Yeah. So he's in a fear. And you project rage at him. And it's always mostly your husband? Like, it's rarely your children?
Oh. If Lewis is at work, it can be my children.
Okay.
No, it's actually, it's 97% of the time it's...
A man?
My husband.
So it's a man, a male?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, well that's very important in the analysis of what's going on.
I have 2 sons and a daughter.
Okay.
So...
And who, if you do get angry with the children...
Daughter.
The daughter is the one you get angry with, is it? Mostly.
Yeah. Oh, no, the middle boy. The middle child. All of them.
I love you. Like, okay. So, but to a lesser extent, about 95% of the time it's aimed at a man.
Yeah.
A grown man. And then occasionally it's aimed at the children.
Yeah.
But nowhere near as much. So just draw the children. Okay. Now I'm going to suggest to you something that is a truth, but you're going to find it difficult to perhaps accept, although I don't think you will actually. You love being in a rage.
Yeah, it's fun. I know, otherwise I would have stopped it.
Why?
Because I get to say what I really want.
All right, so what's that telling you?
That I can't say what I want normally. But you know what? That's so true, because I always say to my kids, why don't you listen the first time? Why do you wait till I'm screaming, swearing, smashing things?
Before you listen.
And they don't. They only ever do what I want, as in, yeah, I know I control.
No, it's okay. Just be honest.
But it's like
okay.
they won't, and my husband won't do it until I've just lost it. And he gets into it because then he's got a crazy wife and he feels self-satisfied. Oh, poor me. Not that he says it, but everyone thinks my husband's first name's Poor.
I love it. I love how honest you are. It's just really lovely. By the way, this doesn't mean I agree with you getting angry with your husband.
No, but it's like he wins too. I think he likes seeing me worked up. I think he really enjoys it, because you know what, when I say I'm getting really upset, Lewis, yes everyone, it's me, it's like he'll go poke, 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 poke. Honey, can you just leave me alone? I feel really upset, and if you continue, or if I stay here, I'm going to start smashing things. Poke, 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 poke. And he must love it, the exhibition of it.
See, now you're not owning, right? And this is we need to take care here, because when we get in a state where we're not owning and we start blaming the other people for our own actions, then we're getting way out of harmony with love and truth.
I'm completely out of harmony.
That's okay. It's okay. We need to acknowledge when it's happening, right, first. And so please don't feel that anything I'm saying to you is going to be a judgment, by the way, either. But I want to be honest, though, about what's actually going on. Every time you say, but he poke, 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 and then I get angry, or the kids don't do what I want until I get angry, or he doesn't do what I want until I get angry, there's a reason why you're getting angry. When you get angry, you can control them into doing the things you want. Agreed? You know that?
Yes.
Okay. So the purpose of the rage is to control the person in fear to do what I want.
Yes.
Now that comes from within you, this very big grief that nobody wants to do what I want, that nobody really loves me enough to even notice what I want. Does that make sense? And the rage is the avoidance of that grief. And that grief is attached to some very strong feelings that you have that you're not loved at all. Right? And these come from childhood emotions. Now while the reason for your rage certainly is you do not want to feel the deep grief, right, of feeling unloved,
unwelcome,
unloved, I can't. Unloved, unwanted, right, and not listened to, and all those things, right? Now, those grief came from the child experience. I'm doing great today. Child experience, right? That grief comes from the child experience, and it's so powerful in you that you'd prefer to be in a rage than feel it. You follow me? You prefer to be the rage. The rage is preferable. Now, while you're preferring the rage, you are giving every woman's spirit who's angry with men an opportunity to express their rage through you. Does that make sense?
It does feel pretty full on and intense and powerful, and like that once it starts, I can't stop it.
Exactly. And what's actually happening is every single spirit down the street who's attracted to these different women who are actually angry, all of a sudden they want to visit you because now you're the one who's really in the place of expressing what they feel towards the male. And you, a lot of times, don't even remember what you've said in that state, do you? Really?
That's right.
Like just going to you're almost going to a blackout state of
it's true.
And they tell you afterwards, and you're going, whoa, what's wrong with me?
And that's why I've been wondering. I don't think it's all me that I'm doing. Oh,
of course, but it begins with you.
Yeah.
Okay? And it begins with your desire to not feel, the desire to avoid those groups of emotions that are extremely painful for you from your childhood. Now, what I would be praying about is, it's pointless at this point praying about experiencing the grief and experiencing the unwanted and unloved feelings, right? Because the truth is you don't want to feel them.
Scared.
You're scared. So talk to God about how scared you are to feel them instead. Does that make sense? You're very afraid to feel them, so talk to God about how afraid you are about feeling. You'll actually find that you'll connect with a lot of the grief this way quite readily by talking to God about how afraid you are to experience them. But at the moment, what's happening is your fear of experiencing your own deep grieving emotions is allowing spirits to just connect to you and express their rage through you to a man who doesn't deserve their rage.
No, or mine.
Or yours. And ironically, the women spirits with you are being quite gutless. Did you hear that, girls? Quite gutless, right? The reason why is because if you're going to be in a rage with somebody, doesn't it make sense to be in a rage with the person who made the grief, who created the grief? And that's not certainly not your husband.
No, he's gentle.
Okay, so sure, he may have a whole set of emotions where he prods you and prods you and prods you and prods you and so forth, which is something he does need to work through, but that's not an excuse to continue allowing a heap of women's spirits to be in a rage with him through you. What is really going on is this feeling here. These feelings here are being avoided. So talk to God about how much you want to avoid them.
Yeah. This is not because, I mean, maybe it is, but I just had, when you were talking then, I mean, he is a big suppressor and comes from a big family who suppress, and I'm just wondering how much of this he draws to himself as well.
Be very careful with that reasoning. Can you see why?
I mean, I acknowledge that some or most of it could be to get me off the hook, but...
Well, let's just look at that, because that reasoning is quite unloving. Basically what you're saying is that his law of attraction invites you being in a rage with him. Now, while that may be true, once you start going down this path, you'll start justifying your rage through that truth. And that is a place that's going to damage your soul quite a lot, right? So while he has different emotions that he is suppressing that cause a group of women spirits to be attracted through you to actually express their rage towards him, that is actually immaterial in this discussion.
Yeah.
The really important point is that you, who say you love him, or maybe at times, these times, certainly don't feel like you do.
No, and that's what I say. I hate you. I hate you.
Yeah. And while you're in that place, you're just avoiding these stuff with your dad, really.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's all with your dad. And you're just avoiding the stuff with your dad by projecting at a man who doesn't deserve and is nothing like your dad. Do you see that? So rather than feel guilty and about that, the better thing to do is talk to God about how afraid you are of dealing with these grieving emotions, right? Rather than hooking into these spirits, because these spirits, they can ruin your life and ruin your marriage if you keep allowing the hook into them. They can also destroy a lot of things in your children too, by the way, because their rage then gets demonstrated through you, and your children, the male children, are going to be absolutely petrified of mummy after a while. In particular, the male children rather than the female children are going to be absolutely petrified of mummy being in this rage after a while, right? Yeah. Or they're going to grow up believing that that's love, which would actually be just as damaging, wouldn't it? Like if they married a woman who's angry just because and felt that was love, that would be very damaging to their life. So it's really quite urgent to, rather than allowing the rage to continue, but you have to be honest that you like it first.
I know I like it.
You know you do like it.
Yeah.
And why do you like it? That's the question. Why do you like it?
Yeah.
That needs to be dealt with emotionally. Why do I like this rage? What does it give to me that I haven't got?
Well, power and control.
And so I actually feel powerless and without any control.
Yeah.
When I'm not in a rage. Can you see that these grieving emotions are going to feel very powerless, no control? That's what they're going to feel like. And at the moment, you feel very unloved. And this feeling of being unloved is not in your current environment so much as your childhood, but it's being reflected in your current environment through your law of attraction. So this is why sometimes your husband neglects to do things that you ask him to do.
Like listen.
Like listen, which he doesn't have to actually do,
No, that's
to love
right.
you. But yes, we have that. This is related to Dad again, isn't it? Dad never listened. You know, so whenever whenever your husband does something Daddy used to do, straight away I'm in the rage. Whereas I need to be straight away in the grief. And if I'm not straight away in the grief, then there's a terror. What am I terrified of? I'm terrified of how much grief there is. So talk to God about how terrified you are. Talk to God about getting help to get through the terror and down into the grief instead. Because while you're avoiding the terror, rage is the only answer.
Thank you very much.
And that will also then disconnect you from the spirits who are wanting to be in a rage with you. And it is like I say, by the way, the whole street of women in the spirit world just comes straight to you when you're in that state. When a person's in a rage, and if it's in a rage towards a male, there's all this gunk flying off you, right? And it's actually going, and if the male's in a place and your husband is in a place where he will receive rage from a woman, so he needs to deal with that issue emotionally, why is he standing around and receiving rage from you? Like nowadays, I'd just walk out, and I wouldn't come back until the rage stopped. You know what I mean? So why is he receiving this rage? There's something going on for him there. So what's going on? So he's receiving all this rage, but that's immaterial. You've got the issue of not wanting to get to the grief, so the rage is there, and all this stuff are flying off him, all entering him, because it's actually, he's open to it entering him. And now these spirits go, you beauty, here's another man we can abuse. You fantastic, you know, and they don't care what the man is. They don't care whether he's a nice man or not a nice man or anything. They'll just go there and do it because they can. Now these women, if you try to disconnect from them, might even become quite nasty with you. And you have a hook into them. And it's not just the grief that you feel, which is actually the grief they also feel towards men, but the hook is this hook that many of you ladies do have, and that is the hook that us women have to stick together. Us women have to feel the same way about men. You know, us women, we've had a lot of trouble with men in our lives, and they've abused us and they've treated bad. And you know, a lot of the men, they've just been sexually promiscuous and they cheated on us and all sorts of things. And we've got to stick together now, even though sticking together means sticking together with a bunch of rageful women. Right? And that needs to somehow stop on the planet before this dynamic will change. So look at that hook as well. This feeling that you have that you've got to get the approval of the women as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not really conscious of that.
Yeah. And when you're not conscious of that, that actually allows the connection even further. Yeah. How's that?
Good. I'm realising I'm scared of my boss. My new boss is a woman, hates children.
Yeah, and you're constantly trying to get her approval?
I'm trying to avoid her criticism, certainly.
Certainly.
I think she's a loose cannon.
Just like the women with you and you. Is that right? Yeah. See, be careful too what you judge in others, because a lot of times what we judge in others we actually have going on inside of ourselves, right? So the truth is, for many of us, we're avoiding deep grief, and in the process of avoiding deep grief, we're in a place of terror about the deep grief. When you're in a place of terror about deep grief, you're better off talking to God about the terror rather than going into the rage. The rage does not help you at all. It damages your soul further. It damages the people around you further, and it doesn't help you get to the causal emotion. So you're far better off skipping that process and allowing yourself to express the terror. And I know that's a powerless feeling. Like, that's a less powerful feeling expressing terror than it is expressing rage, right? But allow yourself to feel the terror and express the terror to God. Talk to God about it in that moment. Remember what I said to you. It's like when I talk to God in that moment, I'm now preventing the influence because now I've got this connection going on with God that these spirits around me straight away feel repelled about. Right? They're not interested in anybody talking to God. They're interested in somebody yelling at their mate. That's all they're interested in. So they go away in that moment. Yep. Who else hasn't had a turn today? Can we come down here? Thank you.
Since I've started doing all of this, I've been quite uncertain whether it's me who's coming up with the thoughts, or who am I talking to when I'm talking to God? Am I talking to spirits who are pretending to be God? Am I making it all up? And I'm just hearing what you're talking about. I got in late on that. So that's part of my question, and the other is certainly I keep now feeling I must be just inundated with spirits, and I feel helpless to know quite what to do with that. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get back to some basics. Every time that you feel overwhelmed in some way about what may be happening with spirits, all you need to do is remember three things. And you know these three things off by heart, but you don't remember them in the situation, right? What are the three things? Long for truth. What's the next one? Long for God's love, right? Long for divine love, yeah. And be humble. Be humble. Okay, so let's look at how this influences our connections with spirits. The beauty of longing for divine truth, let's look at longing for divine love first. The beauty of longing for divine love, as I've already expressed to you, is while the love is entering you, no spirit who is in a negative condition can actually influence you. So straight away, any temporary influence that had been happening up to that point can't happen. Does that make sense? But longing has to come from the soul. It can't just come from the intellect. So that's the trick. Like, a lot of times our longing isn't coming from our soul, it's coming from our intellect, and our intellectual longing is not sufficient to do this. We've got to get to the point of longing for the soul. If you can just switch that mic off, I know, right at the bottom it is underneath, that's it. Good on you. So when it comes to longing for divine love, we need to remember that the prayer is from the soul, from the heart. So there has to be some heart in it. Do you really want this love in that moment? Do you really want to resolve whatever the issue is that you're facing in the moment? You know, let's be honest. So what I loved about your comments earlier where you were being honest about the rage that's there. That I want to be in a rage. Now, so what you do is you talk to God and you say, I want to be in a rage. Why can't I be in a rage, right? And talk to God about the feelings that you have, and then allow yourself to get deep, ask yourself why each time. So why do I want to be in a rage? I want to know why I want to be in a rage all the time. What's going on with me? You know, like really have the feelings associated with it. Now, part of Mary's workshop's coming up. She's going to be going through these kind of things with... No, I'm not. No. Mary's very protective about what's in the workshops. But part of what she's going to do in the workshop is help you get to this place where you're praying about what's really going on rather than what you hope's going on. Do you follow me? Because a lot of times we pray about what we hope is going to happen and not what's really going on. So first thing, long for divine love has to be a real feeling inside of you, not just a thought. There has to be a desire, right? The next thing, there's a child out there that's quite distressed. The next thing is be humble. Be humble means I am going to choose to feel all of my emotions at any one point in time, doesn't it? I have a longing, a passionate desire to feel what I really feel. Not what I think I should feel or what I think other people would be good to see me feeling or any of those things, but actually what I do feel. So being humble means, and that was just demonstrated to you today, like being humble means when I am angry, I feel my anger. Instead of saying, oh, I'm just a bit angry, but you know, it's not really that bad, you know, and all those kind of things. Does that make sense? Instead of doing that, I actually feel my anger. Right? And then, okay, I feel my anger and I express that, but I don't express it to somebody because as soon as I do that, I'm damaging other people. I feel it by expressing it. Get out of bag, whatever, bash, bash, bash. I'm experiencing my anger. I'm experiencing the rage. Now I want to experience what's underneath this rage, whatever is there, right? I want to be humble enough to go to the next level of seeing why I want to be angry. Now, I want to be angry because I want power. So obviously underneath this angry place is a very powerless place. And what am I avoiding? And long for that to actually come to you. When you long for that, you're being humble in that moment. In that moment, it's very, very hard for spirits to enter you while you're being humble. Right? They're going to enter you and influence you when they can get you out of that place and back into a place where you're not really responding to your own emotions anymore and you're responding to theirs. And then thirdly, long for the truth. How do you long for the truth? I want to know, so you talk to God, right? I want to know the truth of what's really going on here. What is really happening? Am I really being influenced by spirits? And then pray for some answers. What's the feeling I have? Oh yeah, the feeling I have is that I am being influenced by spirits. And trust that feeling in that moment. All right, I'm being influenced by spirits. What's my hook into them? Why do I let them influence me like this? And breathe and pray and long for the answer of that. What allows me to hook into them like this? Oh, straight away a thought come about your childhood, or something might have come about. Straight away things will pop into your mind where now your spiritual guides, the ones who actually want to help you get through these emotions, can connect to you, and they'll start giving you informative tips about where to go emotionally as to what is actually being affected. Now, if I do those three basic things every single time I'm faced with something that I feel is overwhelming, something I feel is difficult or whatever, and I just learn those three basic things, and Mary's entire workshop is actually based around those three basic things, right? Once I actually learn about all of that and put that into practice in a daily life, you'll find very rapidly you'll be able to determine if a spirit's influencing you or not, what kind of emotion it is that you're hooked into the spirit or not, and all of those other things automatically start coming to you quite rapidly. And then you don't need to worry so much about who's influencing me here, who's influencing me there. All I need to do is get back to the same three basic things every single time. That's all I need to do. And this is what I love about the Divine Love Path. If you lose your way, you go back to the three basic things every single time. That's all you need to do, nothing else. And the beauty of that is it will expose to you, if you have a sincere desire for those three things, it will automatically expose to you what's really going on. Right? And there's lots of help around you at any one point in time. Lots of help and assistance. There are beautiful spirits who just want to help you every single moment of your day. For them, your moments in the day are like just a twinkling of their eye, right, in the sense of time. So they don't mind spending their whole day with you, particularly if you're in a humble place and longing for God's love. They want to spend their time with you. That's what they enjoy, someone who's willing to listen, someone who's willing to actually apply the things that they've already learned. And so what they want to do is any person who's in that place, they are going to be very attracted to. It's only when you're not in that place that they'll go, here we go again, and they'll watch the whole process and they go, boy, what can we do to help her or him get past this stuck place that they seem to be in? And they don't have a longing to get past it anymore. What do we do now? What can we do to actually show them through some other person or a place or event to influence them? And then after a while they exhaust that even, So what they do is they get all your friends telling you the same thing, and they get all your family telling you the same things, and they get, anyone they can influence to help you. And then after all of that's given up, then they go, oh, well, maybe she's never going to get to it for the next few months or years or whatever needs to happen. I've just got to step back and allow the law of attraction to work now. But we don't need to get to that place. We don't need to get to that place at all, because what we can do straight away is invoke their assistance and be humble enough to receive it. Now we don't need to be in a place where we're waiting around for our law of attraction to pummel us. Right? We can be in a place now where we're actually confronting the issue just by prayer, just by praying about the issue and allowing all of the truth to come to me, because I long for this truth to come to me. I can do that as well. I don't have to go down this track of getting to the point where the only thing that works is my law of attraction. Right? Now, in my own life, there's many times historically in my own life where I've been told things over and over and over and over and over again and totally ignored them, right? Totally ignored them. And I remember one period of time in my life where I think I've related to you before how I was asked whether I loved this particular person by a person who was helping me deal with a lot of my emotions. And he said, "Do you love her?" And I'd say yes, and he'd say, "No, you don't." Like, I'd say, "Yeah, I do," you know, "No, don't." "Okay, well, I suppose we disagree." "Yeah," and he said, "And I'm right." And lo and behold, in the end he was. Like, and 2 years later I found that out. Does that make sense? Like, so a lot of the times what goes on is we're being told over and over and over and over and over and over again the truth, but we don't want to accept it, right? We don't want to accept it, and that's what finishes up getting it to the point where only our law of attraction is going to work, right? So I get to the point where only my law of attraction demonstrates to me that I don't really love the person. Yeah, painful place that, right? Would have been a lot better if, you know, a year and a half earlier I'd listened to somebody. Do you know what I mean? And this is where we often get. We're not often humble enough to actually see what's going on and allow ourselves to really fully connect with what emotional things that we have that are denying the truth entering our lives. So, with me, and it's time to finish now. So, and I'd love to answer a lot more questions about this on another subject. So maybe we'll have another question and answer series about spirits and their interrelationships with us. But if you can just bear in mind that no matter what happens with regard to your spirit connections, if you remember the three basic truths of the divine love path, in the end you will always come back to God. In the end you will always come back to clarity, to peace, to love, acceptance, forgiveness, and all those things. You will automatically come back to those places if you remember those three things and if you put them into practice. So while I've given you a heads up today about how spirit obsession and possession works, and yesterday given you a heads up about how spirits influence you in your life, there is nothing to be afraid of here, and there's nothing new really to put into practice that you already don't know about, because those three things in the end are going to be the things that keep you going through the path. And if you allow those three things to continue to work, you will get there in the end. And don't fall into what's been my trap a lot of the time, and that is wait till the law of attraction pummels you into a place where you now are humble. You know what I mean? You don't have to wait for humility like that. You follow me? You can actually get to a place of humility earlier than getting pummeled into the ground. So allow yourself to be in that place where you're accepting and able to see yourself as you truly are. But thanks, guys, very much for everything. I'd like to thank those people who helped us again this weekend to set up and those who are helping us dismantle tonight as well. If we could just remember to stack in 10s, I think it is, and face the rear of the chair towards the front as we stack them up. And I would also like to thank you too for your donations over the weekend. And hopefully I can sort out the technicals so that things are a little more smoothly as we go along. We'll see you maybe in a couple of weeks' time. All right.